Again to the telecourse in English. I'm your host, Annie Navarro. We have finished the 7 episodes on listening, where we taught you the various ways of teaching and testing listening. But listening is only one half of the oral communication process. For the next 7 episodes, we will look into the other half of the communication cycle. We will concentrate on speaking. In today's episode, we will focus on the nature of the communication process. Look at these people. What are they doing? They are communicating with each other, aren't they? Think of the kind of world we would have if people didn't speak with each other. We would have a world of silence. Actually, even if persons were speaking to each other, it doesn't mean that communication would take place. There are factors that affect communication. Let's find out what these are. But first, let's look at what and who are involved in the communication process. First, we would have a sender of the message. In the case of oral communication, it would be a speaker. The speaker would, of course, have something to say, and that would be his message. This message would be carried by sound waves and would be received by the listener. This is not all there is in the communication process, for there may be physical noise outside that would affect the communication process. Or the listener may not be feeling well or may be emotionally upset, in which case the message sent or received would be distorted. What then would affect the communication process? Let's look at each of the items we said are involved in the communication process. Let's start with the speaker. For one thing, the speech sounds he makes would affect the message if he mispronounces the words. He may be misunderstood. Then, his choice of words would also affect his message. Were they comforting? How did he organize his ideas? Were they easy to follow? All of these would affect the message of the speaker. Well, what about the listener? What factors would affect how well he receives the message? To begin with, his knowledge of the language would definitely affect his understanding of the message. In addition, how the listener feels when he hears the message will also affect his reaction to what he hears. This is what we referred to earlier as noise. That is, internal or psychological noise. The attitude of the listener to the speaker would also affect how he picks up the message. If he is not interested in the speaker, more so in the topic talked about, then he is likely not to pick up the message. Communication breaks down. How often do we make our learners become aware of the roles and responsibilities the speaker and listener have in putting across messages? This episode will certainly give you techniques and strategies on how to make our learners communicate effectively. Specifically, the episode will talk about the nature of the communication process. Let's take a look at this communication model. What does it show? Well, this model is called SMCR, or Source, Message, Channel, and Receiver. Notice that the elements listed under Source, the speaker or sender, are the same elements listed under Receiver. Too often, people tend to forget that their ideas, which can result from their own knowledge and experience, do not match exactly with those of their listeners. Although, apparently, the elements under Source and Receiver are identical, the experience that the speaker has had with each of the items listed could be different from the receiver's experience. The speaker hopes to reach the receiver with a message through the use of the 5 senses. The content of the message may be treated by the source in a variety of ways in order to utilize the senses more effectively and to reach the receiver. Is the model complete without feedback? Certainly not. It is through feedback that people learn whether their ideas are accepted or rejected. Giving the appropriate feedback, as well as reading intelligently, determines the success of communication. Let's consider the difference between bricks and ideas. In the process of communication, an exchange of some kind of information takes place between the source of the speaker and the listener or receiver. But people do not transfer messages as they would move sacks of rice and flour or even a pile of bricks. Instead, the source or the speaker expresses an idea, and in the process, he or she has no guarantee that the receiver understands or accepts the message. If the ideas were sacks of rice or bricks, they could be neatly transferred from one place to another. But ideas are different. They have to be heard, listened to, understood, responded to, for effective communication to take place. Let's try to look at this situation to concretize what I am saying.
Hey James, it's been a long time since I last saw you. Hey James, where have you been?
Why couldn't James respond to Carlos? Evidently, there was a barrier. The pair of earphones blocked communication. How important is feedback then? Receivers of passages should not be passive, because as they respond to ideas, they in turn influence the sender of the message. This interaction can modify or completely change the structure of the ideas. Even when the listener shows little outward response or maintains a certain kind of formal neutrality, he or she may actually be reacting coolly. The alert speaker will again realize the need to adapt and then proceed accordingly. We can therefore say that communication involves process, interaction, and feedback in the use of verbal and nonverbal means of expressing a message. That is to say, communication involves response. If no physical or mental response follows the sending of an idea, no communication occurs. Have you ever experienced communication breakdown in your own classroom? Let's talk more about that when we return.